The divorce papers hit the marble countertop with a satisfying slap that echoed through our designer kitchen. My wife stood there, manicured nails drumming against the granite, her lips curved into that familiar smirk that had once seemed playful but now just looked cruel. "There," she said, her voice dripping with theatrical drama. "Since you're being so difficult about the lake house, maybe this will help you see reason." I looked down at the papers, then back up at her. This was the 4th time in 2 years. The pattern was always the same. She wanted something extravagant. I'd suggest we needed to be more financially responsible, and out came the divorce threats. Last time it was the luxury SUV she absolutely needed. Before that, the month-long European vacation with her friends that cost more than some people's annual salary. Each time, I'd back down, terrified of losing my marriage, of admitting failure, of being alone. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the exhaustion in my bones from working 70-hour weeks while she spent my earnings faster than I could make them. Maybe it was catching those text messages 3 weeks ago, the ones where she told someone named Derek that her husband was just an ATM with a pulse. Or maybe I'd simply reached the end of my rope. "You know what?" I said quietly, reaching for the pen in my shirt pocket. "Okay." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me." I said okay. I flipped to the signature page, my hand surprisingly steady. "You want a divorce? Let's get divorced." The color drained from her face as I signed my name with a flourish on every line that required my signature. The pen scratched against the paper in the suddenly silent kitchen. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking on the wall, her sharp intake of breath. "Wait, what are you doing?" She lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers away, but I'd already signed the last page. "Giving you exactly what you asked for." I slid the papers across the counter toward her. "I assume you'll want to file these as soon as possible? Your lawyer's information is right there on the header." "You can't, you're not supposed to," she sputtered, her carefully maintained composure cracking like ice under pressure. "You're supposed to apologize. You're supposed to promise to do better." "I'm tired of apologizing for being reasonable." I stood up, surprised by how calm I felt. "I'm tired of being threatened every time I don't want to bankrupt us for your latest whim. You wanted out? Now you're out. This is just a negotiation tactic." Her voice rose, taking on a shrill quality I'd never heard before. "You know how this works. I put the papers down, you cave, we move on. That's how we've always done it." "Not anymore." I walked to the cabinet and pulled out a file folder I'd been keeping in the back, behind the cookbooks she'd never once opened. "Since we're getting divorced, I thought you might want this. It's a preliminary division of assets I had drawn up. Very fair, very equitable. Well, it would be equitable if you hadn't spent approximately $300,000 of our joint savings in the last 18 months. Her eyes went wide. "You've been tracking my spending." "Our spending," I corrected. "From our joint accounts. I've also got documentation of the $17,000 you transferred to Derek Peterson last month. Your emotional affair partner. Or is it physical now? Either way, it's relevant to asset division." She grabbed the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. "I've also got screenshots of some very interesting text messages. The ones where you call me an easy mark and tell Derek that I'm too scared of being alone to ever actually leave you. The ones where you laugh about manipulating me with divorce threats. You can't use those. That's an invasion of privacy." "Actually, in this state, I can. Especially when they're from our shared phone plan that I pay for." I set the phone down. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take those signed papers to your lawyer. You're going to accept the asset division I've proposed, which, by the way, is still more generous than what a judge would give you considering your affair and financial behavior. And we're going to end this marriage quietly and civilly." She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. In a way, she hadn't. She'd never seen me with a spine. "And if I don't?" The threat in her voice was hollow now, and we both knew it. "Then we go to court, and all of this becomes public record. Every text message, every excessive purchase, every manipulation. Your family will know. Your friends will know. Derek's wife will definitely know. The last part made her flinch. She hadn't realized I knew Derek was married. My wife collapsed into one of the designer bar stools she'd insisted we needed last fall, each one costing more than a decent used car. Her hands trembled as she stared at the divorce papers, now bearing my signature in bold black ink. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "About Derek. Does it matter?" I leaned against the opposite counter, maintaining distance between us. 3 weeks, if you're curious. I came home early from that conference in Seattle. You were on the patio, laughing on the phone. You didn't hear me come in. The way you talked to him, I'd never heard you sound so happy, so genuine. She looked up, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been shame flicker across her face. But it vanished quickly, replaced by defiance. "You don't understand. You're never here. You're always working, always stressed about money. Money that pays for all of this." I gestured around the kitchen, with its imported Italian tiles and custom cabinetry. Money that paid for the private yoga instructor, the spa memberships, the weekly shopping trips where you drop thousands on clothes you wear once. I deserve nice things. Her voice rose again, the victim narrative taking shape. I gave up my career for this marriage. You worked as a receptionist for 6 months, 7 years ago. And you quit because you said getting up early was affecting your wellness routine. I'd heard this argument before, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. I supported that decision. I've supported every decision. But somewhere along the way, supporting you turned into funding a lifestyle I couldn't afford while you treated me like an obstacle to overcome. She stood abruptly, the stool scraping against the tile. "So what? You've been planning this? Playing the long game while pretending everything was fine?" "I've been protecting myself while hoping things would change." I pulled out another folder from the cabinet. "This is documentation from the marriage counselor I've been seeing for 6 months. Alone, because every time I asked you to come, you had some excuse." She helped me see the pattern clearly. "You've been in therapy? Without telling me?" She looked genuinely shocked. "You didn't notice. Just like you didn't notice when I stopped fighting back about your spending. Or when I started keeping receipts and records. Or when I moved my inheritance from my grandmother into a separate account last year, an account you don't have access to." Her face went pale. "That money was supposed to be for our future. Our future ended the first time you threw divorce papers at me to get what you wanted." I opened the folder, showing her pages of carefully organized documents. "That was 2 years ago. You wanted that convertible. I said we should wait, save up, be responsible. You cried, you raged, and then you brought home divorce papers from some online template service. You weren't serious, you never filed them. But you'd found your weapon." She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture that once would have made me rush to comfort her. Now I just felt tired. The second time was for the Europe trip with your friends. Remember? I just found out my company was doing layoffs. I was terrified I'd lose my job, and you wanted to drop 30,000 on a vacation. When I hesitated, you threatened divorce again. I picked up extra consulting work, worked nights and weekends, just to prove I could provide. "You're making me sound like a monster," she said, her voice small.
"I'm stating facts."
I closed the folder. The third time was for the kitchen renovation. This kitchen, where we're standing right now. We'd just finished paying off your student loans for a degree you never used, and I suggested we build up our emergency fund. You said if I really loved you, I'd want you to have your dream kitchen. Then came the papers again. I just wanted us to have a beautiful home. But her protests were growing weaker. "And now you want a lake house. A second property we can't afford, that you'll use maybe 3 weeks a year, while I work myself into an early grave trying to pay for it." I looked at her directly. "But this time, I'm not going to do it. This time, I'm calling your bluff." It wasn't a bluff. She grabbed the papers, waving them. I really filed these. They are real. I know they are. Your lawyer's name is Amanda Chen. She specializes in high-asset divorces, and she's known for getting wives maximum settlements. You retained her 2 months ago. I found the payment from our joint account. $5,000 retainer. She froze. You really have been tracking everything. Yes. And here's what else I know. You've been unhappy for years, but not unhappy enough to actually leave. Because leaving means losing access to the bank account. It means losing this house, this lifestyle, all the things that matter more to you than our marriage ever did. That's not fair. You know what's not fair. For the first time, I felt anger breaking through my calm exterior. Working 60, 70 hours a week while you tell your affair partner that I'm too pathetic to stand up for myself. Sacrificing time, health, and peace of mind to fund a lifestyle that's never enough. Being treated like an ATM who occasionally gets to sleep next to you. She flinched at the harshness in my voice. I never meant. Yes, you did. I've read the messages, remember? You meant every word. I took a breath, forcing myself back to calm. But here's the thing, I'm grateful for those messages. They gave me clarity. They helped me stop blaming myself for never being enough, because the truth is, I was always enough. You're just someone who will never be satisfied. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of her ragged breathing. She looked down at the papers in her hands, then back at me. What if I don't file them? What if I just tear them up? We can forget this happened. No. The word came out firmer than I expected. You already filed them. That's why you brought them home for me to sign. These are the official copies from the court. And I've signed them. So now you have a choice. You can proceed with the divorce on the reasonable terms I've outlined, or we can fight it out in court and make everything public. My wife sank back onto the bar stool, the divorce papers clutched in her hands like a script for a play that had suddenly gone off script. I could see her mind working, calculating, trying to find an angle she hadn't considered. I need to call Amanda, she said finally, reaching for her phone. It's 8 o'clock at night, but sure. I busied myself making coffee, a mundane task that felt surreal given the circumstances. The machine hummed and hissed, filling the kitchen with the rich aroma of Colombian dark roast, the expensive kind she'd insisted we needed. She stepped out to the living room, and I could hear her voice rising and falling, though I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. I'd anticipated this moment, played it out in my head dozens of times during those therapy sessions. My counselor, Dr. Patricia Morrison, had warned me that the actual confrontation would feel both more and less dramatic than I imagined. She was right. There was no explosive finale, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just the coffee machine beeping and the sound of my wife's increasingly agitated voice from the next room. She returned 15 minutes later, her face flushed. Amanda says I should have consulted her before bringing these papers home. She says you've put me in a difficult position. By signing papers you presented to me. I poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one across the counter toward her. Old habits. That's interesting legal theory. Don't be smug. It doesn't suit you. But there was no heat in her words. She wrapped her hands around the mug, staring into it like it might have answers. She wants to meet with me first thing tomorrow morning. She says I need to prepare for the possibility that this won't go the way I planned. Nothing in life does. I took a sip of my coffee. But I meant what I said. My offer is fair. More than fair, actually. You get half the equity in the house, half of our legitimate joint savings, and your car is paid off. I'm even willing to pay spousal support for 3 years while you figure things out. 3 years. She laughed bitterly. You think I can rebuild a life in 3 years? You're 34 years old, healthy, educated, and perfectly capable of working. Most people would consider that generous. I set down my mug. But here's what you won't get. You won't get my inheritance. You won't get my retirement accounts. They're protected anyway, but I want to be clear. And you won't get to claim half of the consulting business I've built while you were spending our money as fast as I could make it. I contributed to your success. I was your support system. Were you? I asked quietly. Because my therapy records show that your spending habits and constant threats cause me significant anxiety and depression. My doctor put me on medication last year for stress-related high blood pressure. I'm 36 years old, and I have the health markers of someone 20 years older. She set down her mug with a sharp click. So this is revenge? You're punishing me. No, I'm protecting myself. There's a difference. I pulled out yet another folder. I'd become a man of many folders. This is a timeline of every major financial decision we've made in this marriage. Notice anything? She reluctantly looked at the papers I spread before her. Color-coded spreadsheets, highlighted bank statements, printed emails. Every single large purchase was your idea. The house that stretched our budget. The cars. The renovations. The vacations. The memberships and subscriptions and lifestyle expenses. I pointed to specific entries. And here, see these? These are the times I suggested we save, or invest, or be more conservative. Your response was always the same. I was being cheap, or I didn't love you enough, or I was trying to control you. You're twisting things. I'm documenting them. There's a difference. I gathered the papers back up. You want to know the worst part? I would have given you almost anything you wanted if you'd just asked nicely. If you'd been honest about what you needed, or if we'd made decisions together as partners. But you chose manipulation instead. You chose threats. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. When did you stop loving me? The question caught me off guard. I'd prepared for anger, for accusations, for attempts at manipulation. But not for this honest vulnerability. I don't know that I ever did stop, I admitted. That's what made this so hard. I kept hoping you'd change, that we'd find our way back to something real. But you fell in love with the lifestyle I could provide, not with me. And I can't compete with that. That's not true. But her protest was weak. Then tell me, when's my birthday? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted away. What's my favorite book? What was my major in college? What's the name of my best friend from childhood? I wasn't being cruel. I genuinely wanted to know if she could answer even one question. We've been married for 7 years, she said instead. You can't reduce it all to trivia questions. You're right. So let me ask you this. What are my dreams? Not my career goals or financial targets, my actual dreams. What do I want out of life? What keeps me up at night besides money worries? What makes me genuinely happy? She stared at me, and in her silence, I had my answer. I can answer all those questions about you, I continued. You wanted to be an interior designer. Your favorite movie is Breakfast at Tiffany's because you identified with Holly Golightly. You're afraid of being ordinary, of having less than your friends, of not mattering. Your mother made you feel like you had to marry well because she didn't, and you've spent our entire marriage trying to prove something to people who don't care. Tears spilled down her cheeks, ruining her carefully applied makeup. Stop. You wanted the truth. You asked when I stopped loving you. Maybe I still love you, but I don't like you anymore. I don't trust you. And I can't build a life with someone who sees me as a means to an end. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, leaving mascara smudges. For the first time in years, she looked real to me. Not the perfectly curated version she presented to the world, but an actual person with fears and flaws. I don't know how to be different, she whispered. I know. That's why I'm letting you go. The next 3 days were a blur of lawyers, phone calls, and tense silence in our suddenly too large house. My wife moved into the guest room, and we orbited each other like hostile planets, our gravitational fields repelling rather than attracting. Her lawyer, Amanda Chen, turned out to be exactly as formidable as her reputation suggested. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with a precisely cut silver bob and an expression that suggested she'd seen every divorce trick in the book. We met in her downtown office, all glass and steel and uncomfortable modern furniture designed to keep meetings brief. Mr. Hayes, she began, my name sounding like an accusation. My client tells me you've been documenting her spending habits and invaded her privacy. I've been keeping records of our joint finances, I corrected, and monitoring activity on accounts I pay for. Nothing illegal, as you well know. She gave me a thin smile. Let's be direct. You're using the affair and these so-called excessive spending claims to pressure my client into accepting a lowball settlement. With respect, Ms. Chen, there's nothing lowball about offering your client half our marital assets, spousal support, and a clean break. What's really happening here is that your client is used to using divorce as a threat, and she's shocked that it backfired. My own lawyer, Robert Kim, cleared his throat. He was younger than Amanda, but he came highly recommended by Dr. Morrison. We have documentation that Mrs. Hayes has threatened divorce 3 previous times, each time withdrawing when her financial demands were met. This pattern of manipulation is relevant to the court's consideration of her character. Amanda's expression didn't change, but I saw my wife flinch beside her. She looked different in the harsh office lighting, older, tired. She'd lost weight in just a few days, and her usual polish was absent. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. It was jarring. The affair, Amanda began, is documented extensively. Robert slid a folder across the conference table. Text messages, phone records, bank transfers to Mr. Derek Peterson, who is, incidentally, still married and has been informed of the situation by our client. My wife's head snapped up. You told his wife? 2 days ago, I confirmed. She deserved to know. Just like I deserved to know. You vindictive, she started, but Amanda put a hand on her arm. This is why I told you not to speak, Amanda said quietly. Then, to us, the Peterson situation is regrettable, but emotional affairs aren't typically given the same weight as physical affairs in this state. True, Robert agreed. But the pattern of financial manipulation, the documented threats, the excessive spending from joint accounts, these things paint a picture of someone who entered the marriage with less than genuine intentions. That's absurd, Amanda countered. They've been married 7 years. You can't claim fraud at this point. Not fraud. Just reality. I leaned forward. Look, I don't want to destroy her. Despite everything, I don't hate her. I just want out, and I want it to be fair. What I'm offering is fair. Amanda opened her briefcase and pulled out her own documents. My client has prepared a counteroffer. She wants 60% of the marital assets, including partial ownership of your consulting business, spousal support for 10 years, and the house. I actually laughed. No. Your business was built during the marriage. Using my skills, my contacts, and my labor, while working 70-hour weeks to support a lifestyle I couldn't afford. The business is separate, and it stays separate. You can't have everything. My wife finally exploded. You can't just erase me from 7 years of your life and walk away clean. I'm not trying to erase you. I'm trying to untangle a mistake we both made. I looked at her directly. You married me because I was stable, responsible, someone who could give you the life you wanted. I married you because I was lonely and you were beautiful and I thought I was lucky someone like you would choose someone like me. We were both wrong. The conference room fell silent. Even Amanda looked momentarily unsettled by the stark honesty. My wife's voice was barely a whisper. Is that really what you think? That I was some kind of gold digger? I think you were someone who desperately wanted a certain kind of life and saw me as the path to it. I don't think you meant to be cruel. I just don't think you really saw me as a person, separate from what I could provide. She looked down at her hands, at the wedding ring she still wore. I'd taken mine off the night I signed the papers. Here's my final offer, I said, addressing Amanda but watching my wife. 50-50 split of all marital assets acquired during the marriage. That includes the house equity, joint savings, and investments. My inheritance stays separate. It's legally protected anyway. My business stays separate. I can provide documentation that it was built with minimal marital resources. Spousal support for 5 years, not 3 and not 10. After that, She needs to be self-sufficient. The house, my wife started. We sell it and split the proceeds. Neither of us can afford it alone, and I'm not going to work myself to death to pay the mortgage on a house you live in while dating Derek or whoever comes next. Derek and I aren't. We never actually, she trailed off. I don't care anymore, I said, and realized I meant it. Your future relationships are your business. I just want to close this chapter cleanly. Amanda consulted with my wife in whispered tones. Robert looked confident, but I felt hollowed out. This wasn't victory. It was just necessary. Finally, Amanda spoke. We'll agree to the 50-50 split and selling the house. But we want 7 years of spousal support, and we want a lump sum payment of $50,000 for the emotional distress caused by your surveillance and by informing Mr. Peterson's wife. 4 years of support, no lump sum, Robert countered. And we'll agree not to introduce the affair evidence in court, which saves everyone embarrassment. More whispered consultation. My wife's face was unreadable. 6 years, Amanda said finally. And you pay all legal fees. I looked at Robert, who gave a slight nod. It was more than we wanted to pay, but less than a court battle would cost in both money and peace of mind. Deal, I said. On one condition. What? My wife's voice was sharp with suspicion. You never contact me again after the divorce is final. No texts, no calls, no showing up at my office or my future home. Clean break. Complete separation. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something break behind her eyes. Maybe the final realization that this was real, that she'd finally pushed too far. Fine, she whispered. 3 months later, I stood in the living room of my new apartment. Modest, practical, with a view of the city that cost a fraction of what the old house had. The movers had finished unpacking the basics, and I'd sent them away. Now it was just me, a few boxes still to sort through, and the unfamiliar silence of a space that was entirely mine. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks earlier. True to our agreement, the house sold quickly in a hot market. We'd both walked away with our shares, and I'd set up the automatic spousal support payments. My lawyer assured me that financially, I'd recovered better than most men in similar situations. The business was mine, my inheritance was protected, and I'd even managed to rebuild some savings. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was the morning I woke up without that knot of anxiety in my stomach. It was being able to check my bank account without fear of what I'd find. It was the slow, steady drop in my blood pressure that my doctor had noted at my last checkup. You're healing, Dr. Morrison had told me in our most recent session. Not just from the marriage, but from the person you became in it. She was right. I'd spent 7 years shrinking myself, working harder, trying to be enough for someone who would never be satisfied. I'd lost touch with friends because I was always working or too exhausted to socialize. I'd given up hobbies and interests because they seemed frivolous compared to earning more money. I'd become a hollow version of myself, defined entirely by my ability to provide. My phone buzzed with a text from my college roommate. Jake, place looks great, man. Beer tonight. I smiled and typed back, absolutely. Jake had stuck by me through everything, even when I'd pushed him away during the worst years of my marriage. He'd been the one to suggest I see a therapist. He'd been the one to tell me, gently but firmly, that what I was describing wasn't normal marriage stress, it was financial and emotional abuse. I'd resisted that label at first. Abuse was something that happened to other people, not to successful consultants with nice houses and expensive cars. But Dr. Morrison had helped me see it clearly. The manipulation, the threats, the way I'd been conditioned to associate my worth with my wallet, the isolation from friends and family, the constant anxiety. Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. Congratulations on the new place. My stomach clenched. I knew that number. I'd seen it on our old phone bills often enough. My wife. Ex-wife. I corrected myself. I blocked the number without responding. She'd broken our agreement by contacting me, but I wasn't going to engage. That chapter was closed. As I unpacked my books, boxes I hadn't even opened in years because the old house had been decorated to her taste, with no room for my things, I found old photographs. Me at my college graduation, surrounded by family and friends. Me and Jake backpacking through Colorado. Me at my first real job, looking young and hopeful and ambitious. I looked at those photos for a long time. That person had gotten lost somewhere along the way, buried under debt and demands and the crushing weight of never being enough. But maybe he wasn't gone forever. Maybe he was just waiting to be rediscovered. My laptop pinged with an email notification. A potential new client, referred by an old colleague. The project was interesting, challenging, exactly the kind of work I'd gotten into consulting to do. Before, I would have automatically calculated how much it would pay, whether it would cover the next luxury purchase or impending disaster. Now I found myself thinking about whether it would be fulfilling, whether it aligned with my values, whether I'd enjoy it. What a novel concept, enjoying work again. I accepted the project and spent the rest of the afternoon organizing my new home office. Small, efficient, with a window overlooking a park where people walked dogs and kids played. It wasn't impressive or Instagram-worthy, but it was mine. That evening, Jake showed up with a six-pack of good beer, not expensive beer, just good beer, and we sat on my small balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You seem different," Jake observed. "Better." "I feel different," I admitted. "Lighter, maybe. Like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight." "I'm proud of you, man. What you did, calling her bluff, standing up for yourself, that took guts." "Or stupidity," I laughed. "I still can't believe I actually signed those papers on the spot." "Best decision you ever made." Jake clinked his bottle against mine. "So what now? What does the newly single, emotionally healthy version of you want to do with his life?" It was a good question. For 7 years, my life had been about earning, spending, appeasing, surviving. I'd forgotten how to dream about anything else. "I want to work less," I said slowly, the words feeling revolutionary. "I want to take a vacation that's actually relaxing. I want to reconnect with people I lost touch with. I want to date someone eventually, but someone real, someone who likes me whether I'm buying dinner at an expensive restaurant or cooking pasta at home." Sounds pretty good to me. "It sounds terrifying," I admitted. "I don't really know who I am outside of work and that marriage. I've got to figure that out." "You've got time," Jake said. "That's what freedom is. Time to figure things out without someone threatening to leave you every 5 minutes." We sat in comfortable silence, drinking our beer and watching the city lights flicker on as darkness fell. My phone was blessedly quiet. No texts demanding to know where I was or when I'd be home. No fights about money. No threats disguised as negotiations. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I slept until I naturally woke up, without an alarm, without anxiety jolting me awake at 5 a.m. I made coffee in my cheap but functional coffee maker, not the $1,000 espresso machine we'd had before. I scrambled some eggs. I sat at my small kitchen table and ate breakfast while reading news on my tablet. Not rushing, not planning, just existing. My therapist had given me homework. Make a list of things I wanted to do just for me. Not for career advancement. Not to impress anyone. Not to prove anything. Just things that sounded interesting or fun. I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Learn to play guitar. I'd always wanted to. Take a weekend camping trip. Join a recreational sports league. Volunteer somewhere meaningful. Read the stack of books I'd been meaning to get to. Take a cooking class. Visit my parents more often. Say no to projects that don't interest me. The list grew, and as it did, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. It took me a moment to recognize it. Hope. My phone rang. My mother. I'd been avoiding her calls during the divorce, ashamed that I'd failed at marriage, worried about what she'd think. Mom. Sweetheart. I've been so worried. Are you okay? Is everything finalized? Yeah, it's done. I'm good. Actually, I'm better than I've been in years. We talked for an hour, and I told her everything I hadn't been able to say before. She listened, occasionally interjecting with the wisdom only mothers have. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry you went through all that, she said finally. But I'm not sorry it's over. We could see you disappearing, your father and I. Every time we visited, there was less of you and more of whatever she wanted you to be. Why didn't you say something? Would you have listened? She was right. I wouldn't have. I'd been too deep in it, too convinced that working harder would fix everything. Come visit next month, she said. Bring Jake. We'll have a proper dinner, and your father wants to show you his new workshop. And honey, we're proud of you. It takes strength to walk away from something that's destroying you. After we hung up, I sat with those words. Strength. I'd never thought of myself as strong. I'd felt weak for staying so long, weak for not fixing it, weak for letting myself be manipulated. But maybe there was strength in finally saying enough. Maybe courage wasn't the absence of fear but action despite it. The divorce papers sat in a file cabinet in my office, a chapter closed. The signed settlement agreement, the financial disclosures, the official decree, they were just papers now, their power to hurt me dissolved. I thought about my ex-wife sometimes, wondered if she was okay, if she'd learned anything, if Derek had left his wife for her or if that had been just another illusion. But mostly, I didn't think about her at all. She was becoming what she should have always been, someone I used to know. That evening, I went to the gym, not the expensive personal training sessions she'd insisted we both needed, just a regular gym membership where I could work out at my own pace. Afterward, I tried a new Thai restaurant near my apartment. The food was good, and I ate slowly, savoring it, reading a book between bites. This was my life now. Simple, quiet, mine. It wasn't glamorous. No one would make a movie about a man eating pad thai alone while reading a mystery novel. But it was real, and it was enough. As I walked home under the streetlights, my phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. This time, I didn't even look at the message, I just deleted it unread. Whatever she wanted to say, whatever manipulation or plea or anger she wanted to express, I didn't need to hear it. I was done being intimidated. Done being controlled. Done apologizing for having boundaries. I was just done. And in being done, I'd finally found a beginning.